Picture this. It's July 1776, Philadelphia. The heat isn't just uncomfortable, it's oppressive. A thick, humid blanket that smells of rotting river mud, horse manure, and stagnant wood smoke. Inside a cramped, stuffy room on Chestnut Street, 56 men are sweating through their heavy wool coats, swatting at relentless flies that have become as much a part of the debate as the grievances against the king. They aren't just talking. They are committing high treason against the most powerful empire on earth. If they fail, they won't just lose their status, they will swing from a British gallows. But here's the thing. We've heard their story 1,000 times. We know the names Jefferson, Adams, and Franklin. We've seen the statues and the oil paintings. But what about the world outside those windows? What did the air actually taste like on a Tuesday afternoon in June? What did the rhythmic, deafening clatter of iron-rimmed wheels sound like on the uneven cobblestones? What kind of city was powerful enough, rich enough, and chaotic enough to birth a revolution in the first place? Most history books give you a static map and a few dry dates. They give you a sanitized, silent, and frankly boring version of the past. We're doing something different. By cross-referencing 18th century tax records, colonial shipping manifests, and vivid first-hand accounts through advanced AI modeling, we have digitally resurrected the living, breathing Philadelphia of 1776. This isn't a museum tour where you stay behind the velvet rope. This is a sensory journey into the largest, most cosmopolitan, and most dangerous city in British North America. A city of 30,000 souls, wealthy Quakers, desperate rebels, master printers, and enslaved Africans, all living on the edge of a global explosion. We aren't going into the State House yet. First, we're going into the mud of the streets. We're going to show you the Philadelphia that the Founding Fathers actually walked through, and the version of this city that history almost forgot. Let's step back 250 years. The first thing you notice about Philadelphia in 1776 isn't the chaos of revolution, it's the staggering sense of order. If you walk through Boston at this time, you'd be lost in a medieval maze of winding cow paths and crooked alleys. New York? A jumble of narrow, crowded lanes that seemed to grow at random. But Philadelphia was different. It was a modern marvel, the first truly planned city in the colonies. This was the radical vision of William Penn, laid out nearly a century earlier, and by 1776 that vision had reached its peak. Penn didn't want the cramped, plague-ridden streets of London. He wanted a green country town. He designed a massive grid of straight streets crossing at perfect right angles. Broad avenues like Broad Street and High Street, now Market Street, were as wide as 100 feet. In an era where most roads were barely wide enough for two horses to pass, these avenues were gargantuan. They weren't just paths, they were statements of permanence and rational thought. As you walk these straight lines, you'll notice the names. Penn had a logic for everything. The streets running north to south were simply numbered. The streets running east to west, they were named after trees: chestnut, walnut, spruce, pine. It was a system so simple that any stranger could navigate the city without a map. But it wasn't just the layout that impressed, it was the material. Philadelphia in 1776 is a city of red brick. Thousands of row houses, 2 and 3 stories tall, line the streets in neat, disciplined rows. These aren't the rough-hewn log cabins of the frontier. They are elegant, sophisticated structures with white marble steps and gleaming glass windows. The infrastructure here shocks the 18th century traveler. You aren't trudging through knee-deep mud. You are walking on paved brick sidewalks. At night, the city doesn't fall into total darkness. It glows. Hundreds of public street lamps, fueled by whale oil, light the thoroughfares, a luxury almost unheard of in the rest of North America. To a visitor from Europe, Philadelphia doesn't feel like a colonial outpost on the edge of a wild continent. It feels like a real city. It feels like the future. This atmosphere of order and prosperity is exactly what gave the citizens here their confidence. They weren't just struggling to survive, they were thriving. But beneath this neat, rational grid, the population was anything but uniform. It was a boiling cauldron of different languages, faiths, and secrets. If the grid provided the rigid bones of Philadelphia, its people provided a pulsing, chaotic, and incredibly diverse heart. In 1776, this wasn't just a British colonial town, it was the most diverse city in the entire English-speaking world, London included. As you walk down 2nd Street, the English you hear is just one of many languages floating through the humid air. You'd hear the thick, guttural tones of High German, the lyrical lilt of Scots Gaelic, the rapid-fire French of Huguenot refugees, and the diverse dialects of West Africa. At the top of the social ladder were the Quakers, William Penn's people. By 1776, they still dominated the wealthy merchant class, but their grip on the city's soul was slipping. They were the plain folk who had grown incredibly rich, living in brick mansions while preaching humility. But right on their heels were the Germans. They made up nearly a third of the population, so prominent that Benjamin Franklin famously worried that English might become a secondary language in Pennsylvania. These weren't just farmers. They were master craftsmen, bakers, and printers who brought a distinct Central European flavor to the city's architecture and diet. Then there was the middling sort, the backbone of the Revolution. These were the artisans, the silversmiths, the tanners, and the shipwrights. Philadelphia was a city of doers. Unlike the rigid class systems of Europe, a man with a trade in Philadelphia could actually climb the ladder. This social mobility was a magnet for the ambitious and the desperate alike. But look closer at the docks and the workshops. You see free Black Americans running successful businesses alongside enslaved Africans, carrying heavy crates of Madeira wine. You see Jewish merchants from Portugal and Spain negotiating deals in the coffee houses. This diversity wasn't just a demographic accident. It was Philadelphia's greatest strength and its most volatile fuse. People hadn't come here to be Americans yet. They came for the freedom to be themselves, whether that meant practicing their religion without fear or simply making enough money to eat meat every day. This collision of cultures created a friction, an energy that made Philadelphia the only place on the continent where a radical idea like independence could actually catch fire. Sunrise in 1776. Philadelphia isn't a quiet affair. There are no alarm clocks here, but you don't need them. At 5 a.m, the heavy bronze bells of Christ Church begin to toll, a deep resonant vibration that rattles the glass in your window panes. Almost immediately, the city's unique percussion starts, the deafening clack, clack, clack of iron-rimmed wagon wheels striking the uneven cobblestones. It's a rhythmic, bone-shaking sound that signals the start of the workday in the busiest port in the colonies. As you swing open your front door, the air hits you, and it's a shock to the system. This isn't the fresh, pine-scented air of the Pennsylvania countryside. It's a thick, humid soup of smells. First, the sharp, acrid bite of wood smoke from 30,000 cooking fires. Then, the heavy, earthy stench of horse manure. Tons of it, deposited daily by the thousands of animals that are the city's only engines. On a warm July day, the breeze off the Delaware River doesn't bring relief. It brings a salty, fishy, briny smell of rotting dock timber and stagnant swamp water. It's the smell of a city packed too tightly for its own good. The streets are already a theater of sound. You can't walk a block without hearing the street cries, the 18th century version of a radio ad. "Pepper pot, all hot," screams a woman carrying a steaming tureen of spicy tripe soup. "Oysters, fat oysters," bellows a man pushing a wooden barrow fresh from the docks. You hear the rhythmic thwack of rugs being beaten against brick walls and the constant metallic ting-ting-ting of the blacksmith's hammer echoing from a nearby alleyway. Everywhere is movement. You're brushing shoulders with sailors in canvas trousers, wealthy merchants in silk waistcoats, and chimney sweeps covered in soot. There is a friction here, a kinetic energy that makes the air feel electric. This isn't the quiet, dignified history we see in museum exhibits. It is loud, it is stinky, and it is incredibly alive. And all of this chaos, all of this sensory overload is funneling toward one specific place, the literal heart and gut of Philadelphia. But what was it about this next location that made even the most snobbish European visitors stop in their tracks with envy? If the State House is the brain of the revolution, then High Street Market is its gut. To understand why Philadelphia was the heart of the rebellion, you have to look at what was on its dinner plates. Running right down the center of High Street, the widest thoroughfare in the city, is the longest outdoor market in the American colonies. It's a literal forest of wooden stalls, stretching for blocks, protected by long brick sheds with arched roofs. As you push through the crowd, the sheer abundance is staggering. European visitors who stepped off the boats in 1776 were often moved to tears by what they saw here. In London or Paris, the working poor survived on gray bread and watered-down gin. But here, even a modest shoemaker or a simple blacksmith eats like a king. You see stalls overflowing with massive sides of beef, mountains of pork, and piles of mutton. You see game birds, duck, turkey, and pheasant hanging from hooks. There's fish so fresh they were still swimming in the Delaware 2 hours ago. Massive sturgeon, silver shad, and piles of oysters the size of a man's hand. And then there's the produce. Philadelphia sits in the middle of the most fertile agricultural land in the North American continent. You see wagons coming in from the German farms of Lancaster, loaded with golden butter, heavy wheels of cheese, barrels of crisp cider, and bags of fine white flour. This wasn't just a place to buy food, it was a display of incredible, almost offensive wealth. This abundance is the hidden engine of 1776. History books often focus on high ideals and philosophy, but revolutions aren't fought by starving people. They're fought by people who have something to lose. The citizens of Philadelphia didn't feel like desperate colonists clinging to the edge of a wild frontier. They felt like prosperous, civilized British subjects who were being denied their rightful place in the empire. They had the calories, the health, and the economic power to stand up and say no. When you have a full stomach and a pocket full of silver from the market, you have the luxury to sit in a tavern and think about things like natural rights and taxation without representation. But where did those ideas actually come from? The food fueled the bodies, but something else was fueling the minds. To find that, we have to leave the smell of fresh bread and meat behind and head toward a different kind of shop, one that smelled of linseed oil and heavy black ink. If the market was the city's stomach, the printing shops were its nervous system. In 1776, Philadelphia wasn't just the political capital. It was the media capital of North America. This was the city that Benjamin Franklin had spent decades transforming into a publishing powerhouse, and by the time the Revolution arrived, the infrastructure of dissent was already in place. Walking into a print shop in the summer of 1776 is like walking into a furnace. The heat is thick with the scent of hot lead and damp paper. You see men stripped to their waist, muscles strained as they operate the common press, a massive, hand-cranked beast of oak and iron. There is no automation here. Every single letter of the alphabet is a tiny piece of lead that must be picked out of a case by hand and set into a frame, one by one. A single mistake, a dropped E or a flipped B, and the entire page is ruined. Once the type is set, the printer beats the leather ink balls against the frame, lays a sheet of paper, and pulls the heavy lever with enough force to crush a man's hand. A master printer and his apprentice might churn out 250 sheets an hour. It was grueling, repetitive, and dangerous work. But what was coming off those presses was more explosive than gunpowder. In January 1776, a failed corset maker from England named Thomas Paine published a 47-page pamphlet right here in Philadelphia. He called it Common Sense. Before this, many colonists were still hesitant about a total break from Britain. Paine's words changed everything. He didn't write for the elite. He wrote for the man in the tavern and the woman in the market. To understand the impact, you have to look at the numbers. Common Sense sold 500,000 copies in its first year. In a country of only 2.5 million people, that is the equivalent of selling 70 million copies today. It was, relative to population, the most read document in American history. It was everywhere. It was read aloud in coffee houses, passed around in army camps, and debated on street corners. The printing press was the 18th century's internet. It allowed ideas to travel faster than the British Army could march. But as these radical words spread through the neat brick streets of Philadelphia, they didn't just unite people, they tore them apart. Because while the printers were churning out calls for liberty, the neighbors living right next door to them were looking at those same pamphlets with absolute horror. There is a myth in American history that the Revolution was a unanimous surge of patriotism, that every man, woman, and child in Philadelphia stood on their doorsteps cheering as the Declaration was read. The reality is far messier and much more dangerous. In 1776, Philadelphia wasn't just a city at war with England, it was a city at war with itself. As you walk down the neat brick streets, you aren't just passing neighbors, you're passing enemies. The beautiful row houses that look so orderly from the outside are hiding deep, bitter divisions. On one block, you might find a radical artisan, a man who has risked everything to print rebel pamphlets. Right next door lives a wealthy merchant who views the Continental Congress as a mob of treasonous lunatics. For him, independence doesn't mean liberty. It means the total destruction of his business, his social standing, and his ties to the civilized world of London. Then there are the Quakers. For decades, they were the moral and political compass of the city, but the revolution has pushed them into a corner. Their deeply held pacifism forbids them from taking up arms, which the Patriots interpret as cowardice, or, worse, secret loyalty to the king. In the summer of 1776, being neutral is a dangerous game. Families are being torn apart at the dinner table. Friendships that spanned decades are ending in bitter silences on street corners. This was a civil war before it was a war for independence. Tories and Patriots attend the same churches, shop at the same stalls in the high street market, and walk the same docks, all while watching each other with narrow, suspicious eyes. There are whispers of spies in the taverns and lists of enemies to the cause being drawn up in dark rooms. But as these two sides debated who should rule the land, there was a third group, a massive population living in the shadows of the red brick houses, who were asking a much more fundamental question. They were watching the men in the State House talk about unalienable rights and universal liberty, and they were waiting to see if those words actually applied to them. Because, in the most enlightened city in America, the most brutal form of oppression was still very much for sale. As the echoes of the word liberty ring out from the State House and settle into the hot, humid air of the city, they collide with a brutal reality just a few blocks away from where Thomas Jefferson is writing that all men are created equal. The clink of literal chains can still be heard. This is the great contradiction of 1776 Philadelphia. In the very cradle of American freedom, human beings are still being bought and sold like the cattle in the high street market. In 1776, approximately 1,500 enslaved people live within the city limits of Philadelphia. They are the invisible hands that keep the city running. They are the domestic servants in the elegant brick row houses, the laborers hauling heavy barrels of flour on the Delaware docks, and the skilled craftsmen in the back of the blacksmith shops. Many of the very delegates sitting in the Continental Congress, men we revere as the architects of freedom, own other human beings. The hypocrisy is so thick you can almost taste it in the swampy summer air. Even Benjamin Franklin, the city's favorite son, had owned slaves earlier in his life, though by 1776, his conscience has begun to shift, and he is moving toward the abolitionist cause that would later define his final years. But the city is at a crossroads. While the white population debates their enslavement to King George, the black population of Philadelphia is watching, waiting, and acting. Despite the chains, Philadelphia in 1776 is also home to one of the largest and most vibrant free black communities in the colonies. In the shadows of the Revolution, the seeds of black American institutional life are being planted. Men like Richard Allen, who would later found the African Methodist Episcopal Church, are navigating these very streets, turning the rhetoric of the Revolution against the institution of slavery itself. For them, 1776 isn't just about taxes or tea, it's a test of whether the American experiment is a cruel joke or a genuine promise. The moral weight of this contradiction hangs over the city as heavily as the summer heat. But as the sun begins to set over the red brick horizon, the tension shifts from the philosophical to the social. Because when the workday ends in Philadelphia, the focus moves from the high-minded debates of the State House to the crowded smoky rooms where the real spirit of the city and the revolution is truly uncorked. As the sun dips below the horizon, the focus of Philadelphia shifts from the formal halls of the State House to the warm, flickering light of the taverns. Philadelphia has an insane number of them. Over 120 licensed drinking establishments for a population of just 30,000. That's one tavern for every 250 residents. But these aren't just bars. They are the city's social, political, and economic nervous system. At the legendary City Tavern on 2nd Street, the air is thick with the scent of roast beef, fresh oysters, and the heavy sweet aroma of Madeira wine. This is where Washington, Jefferson, and Adams gather after a long day of debating treason. In these smoky rooms, political alliances are forged, and the latest news from the docks is dissected over overflowing tankards of ale. The American Revolution wasn't just a product of quiet libraries and pristine ink. It was fueled by high spirits and heated public arguments. These men were building a nation, and truth be told, they were often doing it slightly drunk. But as the tavern candles flicker low and the laughter fades into the wood-paneled walls, the reality of their gamble begins to settle in. Outside the warm embrace of the hearth, the streets are quieting down, and the true weight of an uncertain tomorrow starts to hang heavy in the cool night air. The city is still the capital of an idea, but that idea is about to be tested by fire. You lie in your bed as the humid night air hangs heavy. Through the open window, you hear the rhythmic tapping of the night watchman's staff on the cobblestones. 10 o'clock, and all is well, he calls out. But deep down, you know it isn't. In a few months, the British will invade. These streets will be occupied by redcoats, and the men on Chestnut Street will be fugitives. Yet, tonight, Philadelphia remains the capital of a dream, a fragile, dangerous experiment in liberty that the world has never seen before. You are living in the most consequential city on earth during its most consequential year. The words printed today must survive, even if the city does not. Thanks for joining us in 1776. If you enjoyed this journey through time-warp cities, hit subscribe and tell us, what city should we reconstruct next? History is waiting. See you very soon.